Ma Pimpo Haiti, the Haitian diaspora living in Haiti podcast. The goal of the show, of course, is to break down what it means to transition, move, live, and be in Haiti. My co-host, your favorite pastor.
You already know, Mark Antoine.
Of course, can't do the show without him. And today we have an incredible guest, a guest who he has inspired me to. I was living in Haiti for a bit, and I ran across him, and he was doing something phenomenal. What was it? Doing digital nomad stuff. He was living in Haiti but working for a company abroad, and that sort of tweaked it for me. I was like, wait a minute. Because I was out here just hustling and doing my entrepreneurial stuff. Wait a minute, I can maybe get a foundation of income, and from there we became fast friends. And of course, the other real cool thing about our guest here is that he actually resides in Cap-Haitien, right? Outside, not for those who don't know, Cap-Haitien is the second biggest city in Haiti, and very early on, I wanted to get a perspective of, because everybody's Port-au-Prince, right? So I wanted to get a perspective of someone who resides full time in another city outside of PAP, and so without further ado, my guest, Junior JB. I'm really happy to have you on the show. How are you doing, brother?
Thank you very much. You guys are too kind. I appreciate the invitation. Thank you.
And so with Junior JB, just Junior for short, just do Junior. It's that the entire process of deciding to move to Haiti, to transition. I'm gonna ask you about all that,
sure.
And in particular, because I know as well, you have some experience with Port-au-Prince, so we really want to get a sense of the differences as it relates to living in that city versus Port-au-Prince. And then, of course, we're going to wrap up the conversation with really, the digital nomad, just lifestyle idea and some tips and tricks in terms of getting opportunities, keeping those opportunities, and the challenges as it relates to doing such a digital nomad lifestyle in Haiti, where, internet can be an issue, electricity can be an issue. So we'll talk all about that. So those guys who are tuning in early, stay tuned. We have a really packed conversation. So Junior, the floor is yours. Tell us about you, like your background, when you're stateside, that whole gestation, sure. And then ultimately what sprung to and you come in to be here with us crazies guys, numbskulls. Be a mark here.
Right. Absolutely. So thank you again. There's a lot for me to touch upon. So I'll try to it's going to be interesting to keep it to the hour. But just to back up a little bit to my time in the States, I had known right after receiving my degree in psychology and philosophy that I wanted to get involved in something regarding education. So I actually ended up, after receiving my degree, hopping into teaching. And the reason why I say that is because teaching allows the ability, right, to go back and forth to Haiti. So when I had those summers off, I was able to kind of get to Haiti, rest, recharge, so to speak. And that's what actually really caught the bug in terms of the desire to go and live full time. I remember one year I had come back from the summer in Haiti, and I was just kind of thinking, what if I reverse this? What if I actually ended up teaching in Haiti and then returning to the States for the summers rather than the States and then Haiti for the summer? So I think that was really the part where I started to consider what it would look like to spend the majority of my time in Haiti. So back and forth. My family is originally from Port-au-Prince. Still have family there. So I ended up spending a considerable amount of time in Port-au-Prince. My experience is, I think, a little different from others who might decide to return, in that I didn't save up a whole bunch of money. I didn't get, I didn't send any car. I didn't do anything like that. I just, for me, it was more of a push factor than a pull factor meaning a push out of the United States rather than a pull to Haiti. I didn't show up with a particular um, project in mind focused on Haiti. I didn't show up with a non-governmental organization or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
I just showed up because I wanted to get out of the rat race of the states. So I think that's important to note in terms of how I got back to Haiti and under what context I came back. So in Port-au-Prince, I actually had a lot of time to just walk around. I walk around the different areas, Delma, wherever it is, and really get to reacquaint myself with the country, with the way that the island functions, right? Because
Yeah,
even if
yeah,
you're in Boston or New York or Miami, or whatever the case may be, uh, in Haiti, it's really c'est la poula, as we
right.
say.
Snapula.
There's nothing like being in the actual country with everybody, with all your brothers and sisters. So
Mm-hmm.
just getting acquainted to that, and then Cape Haitian. Honestly, I knew that even in the States, I'm a city guy. I love to be in the city. So Cape Haitian was a natural progression for me.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be a liar if I said that the security situation in Port-au-Prince, especially over the years, became tenuous. Um, that's a factor for my decision to move to Cape Haitian. But also, I had a chance to just visit. We don't do that enough in the country, especially those of us who are based in Port-au-Prince, just to get out. I love to see your videos, Chris, where you're getting out to the countryside and just showing other facets, right? Because
Mhm.
in Port-au-Prince, it's very business oriented. You're there for business, people flying in, flying out for business.
Yeah.
But having that time to get out to the countryside and see different areas is really important. So I was already familiar with Cape Haitian before I decided to move out of Port-au-Prince. I'd already been there a couple of times, did the touristy things, the Milo, the Citadel. So that was it was an easy, I think it was an easier transition for me because there was a level of familiarity.
Mm-hmm.
you know and also being a city person, I already knew that I couldn't really position myself way outside of Port-au-Prince. Like, I know I needed a certain level of infrastructure
Mm-hmm.
that would allow me to stay connected to friends and family and everything. And so in my mind, it just made sense that if I was going to continue to live in Haiti and thrive, that I need to be in. I need to take my chance with the second largest city. You
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
So yeah.
All right, all right. So yeah, lot to compact there. Now, I just got to interject something really quick on when it comes to the. So you said when you came to Haiti, you were, because I know for me, like from the get, like when I was moving about, I had some family who I borrowed their car, they dropped me off, they moved me around in their car. Honestly, I maybe took the tap thus far, living in 83, 4 years now, maybe twice, right? And so you're telling me that
Yeah.
you from day one you were using taps and and I'm so surprised. I'm struggling on my own breath here in motos and all that. Is that right?
Yeah, and the thing about it is this, when I started really moving back and forth and traveling, the idea naturally came about, to buy a car. Buy a car, order to get a car in Miami and ship it to Haiti. A lot of friends and family said that I got to make my move on that. And
Yeah.
really, it was something that I had in my sights. Um, the public transportation in Haiti leaves much to be desired, but there's something about just being out and about that I got used to. So
Mm-hmm.
basically, I wasn't willing to hang in the States any longer while I saved up to buy a car. And I think some folks might say, well, that's kind of silly. You couldn't, spend another year to save up. But I was just, the context in which I decided to return, I was ready to go, and I was ready to go like yesterday. And so I just wanted to be in Haiti, and then I'd say I'll figure out the car situation and everything else after that. Um, so I think that's a little bit different from those who might be deciding to hit a particular number or to
Yeah.
save a particular sum of money before making the jump. I more so wanted to make the jump first, and then within reason, right, figure out some of those other aspects later. But as we say, I arrived and I just,
Yeah.
dégage him, and I got out there. I had some family, who could drive me around, but there reaches a certain point, right, where you got to make the difference between I'm visiting and I'm living, right?
Hmm.
And so the fam who was there, if you're visiting is different, right? They're happy to see you back. They're happy to have you in town for, a couple of weeks or a month or something like that. And they can kind of help you out
Right.
to get around or whatnot. But if you're deciding, hey, I'm going to be here for a longer stretch, then you obviously don't want to, depend on them to that
Hmm.
level, to that extent. So after I, got my feet wet, I just had to rely on my family less and less. So
Hmm.
rather than family, driving me somewhere, you know, kind of waiting, picking me up or whatever, eventually they just got to a point where it's like, okay, we're gonna drop you off, and you can take the tap back down. Or it's funny. There's one time I was up in Delma. I think it was Delma uh 80, Delma 80, and I had called my family and I told them, I said, hey, I'm all done. I'm all done with what I needed to do. Can you come grab me? Because I got my laptop, I got all this stuff with me. And he just told me, he was like, no, you come down on the camionette like everybody else. So for those of y'all, if you're coming back with family, just it's important to make that distinction between visiting and living. And if you're
Yeah.
planning to be there for a long period of time, being in Haiti, then you just kind of have to make those adjustments to have your independence. It's also much
Yeah.
better too, because you're not going to worry about, so and so going to be available, or such and such. Is the car around? No, you just, you get out there and kind of hit the pavement with everybody else.
Hmm.
Yeah. My question for you, Junior. When I came back, I was the Moto King. I mean, I would hop on motos all the way from Kafu all the way to Petrol, anything I needed. I didn't take top much because I didn't like the, when you get on the top, it's kind of like a fight to get on, and I didn't want to have to deal with that. So it was
Hmm.
easier for me to, wave down a moto, whatever they tell me, let's go and we out. Um, but my
Hmm.
question for you is, what was your network like outside of your family when you returned? Like you said, there's a big difference when you're coming here just for a few weeks and when you're coming here for the long haul. And one of the big things for me is outside of my family, I had a few friends, but I didn't have much of a network. What was your network like outside of your family when you came back, and how did you grow that over time?
No, that's a great question. And there was it's interesting because I've oscillated between really being out and about. Like there's times I get up and get out, and I'll just be out all day long, trying to move around, make connections. Um, I'm more introverted in nature,
Mhm.
so that was always a challenge for me to like get into different places and spaces and talk to people, and just kind of get out there. So I oscillated between that and just literally hanging around the house. Like I'd be hanging around the house, with the family. People will come through, and that, I'd meet a few people, right? But they're not in my generation. It's not my peer group.
Mhm.
But something that I had in mind when I knew I want to come back home, I said, hey, I don't want to put myself in a situation where um, my network is not, it's not diverse. And so by that, I mean, I didn't just want to connect with expats, what they call expats, or others who came back. I knew I wanted to also network and meet with folks who are in the country as well, Haitian nationals. it just wherever you are, right? You want to have a diverse social network so that you don't, so that you don't pigeonhole yourself in any particular, area. So I just got out and I started speaking more.
Yeah,
I think another thing is that in order to build a diverse network, uh, we know the importance and the power of language. And if you've been abroad in the States or Canada or France, and your native language has shifted,
yeah,
and by that I mean that you no longer think in Creole. You no longer act in Creole. Your language has shifted so that you're thinking in English or you're thinking in French. It's going to make it difficult to connect or to reconnect with that family or those friends. And so, like others who have returned, I had to brush up. I had to
yeah,
get back the phrases and the language. And even if you speaking that the Creole in the New York or Miami, you
yeah,
get back to the islands and you hear something that you haven't heard in like 10, 15, 20 years. And you're like,
yeah,
what does that mean again? Or you might see a food that you haven't seen since, you were a kid. So I think for me, the first part to really be able to build my network was to make sure that I was armed, as much as I could be
mm,
with the Haitian Creole language, because that's the language of the country. It's
yeah.
our language, and so without having that at my disposal, at my beck and call, I already knew that I would be limited in terms of my interactions and my network.
I remember when so for folks who don't know, when I shot the Cap-Haitien episode on Seejeanty, one of the first episodes when I really rebooted the channel, Junior was one of the folks who really acted as my sort of go-to, because he was in Cap-Haitien, obviously. So I leveraged his knowledge and everything. What I remember the most was there was a few times where you had to go in on some people, like the taxi driver who kind of was trying to hustle us. There was just another. I remember when there was another situation where there was some hustlers, and you had to go in. And I'm telling Junior, hold on, man. I'm trying to calm Junior down, but Junior was ready to go and dropping Creole that there was a little accent to it, but still very much mature. And I just thought, he's definitely adjusting. He's become because that's Haitians are very like that. We're Haitians and Haiti are very much argumentative, and
Mhm.
and you gotta assert yourself. There's no doubt about it, especially living there as long as I have. So
Yeah.
I can speak firsthand that you when it comes to language and not being afraid to engage in that, you got it, man.
Well,
But let me.
how
Mhm.
did you do with Chris mentions that language and being assertive. One of the things whenever I would get on the moto, because no matter how well we speak Creole, we still have that bit of unloop. You know what I'm saying? People can automatically sense, this guy is Jasper. I like to think that my Creole is very well, but even when I say bonjour, people automatically know this guy is a Jasper. So how did you
Yeah.
deal with that? Did you encounter people giving you hardship, giving you grief, or so Jasper out, yeah, or were people very welcoming in that? Did they appreciate that? What was your experience with that?
Yeah, no, great question. And Chris, it's funny to hear. Just yeah, it was a fun experience. You coming up to visit and just you're balancing, like you want your friend, right? You want your friend to have a pleasant experience, right? Just like when someone's coming to your house, you want your friend to have a pleasant experience so that they come back. So it's just funny to hear that perspective that you provided. So thanks. Yeah, yeah, Mark, to the question about the language, I think it was a strong and long horizon, right? From you just get back home, so you're trying to figure things out. You're trying to kind of get your bearings again because you've been out for a while. So there was definitely a time period where I was green. I was more green, and you say something and people just automatically they're like, "Oh, you've been gone for a while at the very
Yeah,
least." And so what really helped me with that is actually that diversified network. So I'd have friends who, in the expat community or NGOs, as much as I'd have friends who are Haitian nationals, so I'd keep that diverse group and I'd keep up those connections because, when you're back home and you're trying to get your bearings about you, it's not only your natural language that changes, that you're thinking in English or French, but also culturally you're thinking in that manner, because you're just so I like to say it's important to be bilingual, but it's also just as important to be bicultural, because if you don't have that, if you don't kind of build both of those up or regain them, then it's going to be very difficult or uncomfortable to function in the society. And so, the long story short, I would react when I first came back. I would react and just, accept these things like, oh, diaspora, or whatever, étranger, blanc, tout carré des choses, all type of things that they would say, and it's like, oh yeah, that's how it is. But in talking and interacting with my network, I realized that those type of responses, it wasn't really helpful to address a situation, especially if you're in a tight spot, which many times you can be in Haiti. You're trying to negotiate something, you're trying to figure something out, and I wanted to make sure to respond to things, to respond to situations in a way that would demonstrate that I have not only command of the language again, but command of the culture, right? Because if you can't demonstrate that, it can quickly become a field day. We're like, okay, so and so is not hip to the game. Let's do this. Let's do A, B, C, X, Y, Z. And so the second part to what I did to address that, besides just getting tips from my network, getting tips from friends who are Haitian nationals, is just also being out in the streets, right? So quick example, if I was walking around Port-au-Prince with a friend of mine who is a Haitian national, and a situation arises, someone's like, oh, diaspora blanc by sayo, I would actually more so watch how my friend reacted to that. How did he take it? How would he react? And so at times, friends will speak up and say, hey, whatever, he's been back. And so I'm just kind of watching their reaction as a cue to see how are these things responded to culturally, just as a reminder. But then the other helpful thing for me was actually just being out and about on my own. Because if you always got a friend who's been in the country, who hasn't left, who hasn't traveled, I think what I used to have a tendency to do is like, let them handle that, let them handle this situation, or they might just react really fast and I don't even have to say nothing. But when that quickly subsides, right? Because again, when you're visiting, friends can always be there with you. But when you're living, your friends got their lives to live. So you got to just go out and do your thing. So it was actually really helpful to me to just be out and about in the streets myself, so that I didn't have any backup. It's like you really just got to figure it out, trial and error, to regain that sense of biculturalism.
So when you this is a twofold question here. So, the big thing about moving back and why so many folks are apprehensive is the issue of security, right? And now, if you can talk about like the difference between Port-au-Prince and Cap-Haitien in terms of that feeling of security, right? And ultimately, was that a factor to why you chose Port-au-Prince and Cap-Haitien? And again, what sort of differences as it relates to the size, right? Because Port-au-Prince is so much more massive. Cap-Haitien, even though it is the second biggest city, it is still very, heck, I can tell you how many times in Port-au-Prince, it feels like a small town, and that's Port-au-Prince, right? And so Cap-Haitien certainly has sure has even smaller town feel. But how does that all mix into the feeling of security as someone who, again, I'm so impressed in how you go about it. And you still don't have a car as of today. So even when you're in Haiti, you're moving around, very raw. Like you're very,
Yeah.
the word I use may make vulnerable because you're in the top and you may have a look, an accent of a foreigner. So all that it mixes together to want me to ask you, that very, Jumu style of question. Go ahead.
Yeah, good question. Good question. So, um, my initial reaction is that when we think about Port-au-Prince versus Cape-Haitien as the second largest city, one of the first things that really came to my mind, after you're living in Haiti, you're back in Haiti for a while. Naturally, you start to think about, surprise, surprise, land. You start to think about land. You start to think about, building a house or buying a house. You start to check prices and whatnot. And so there's no doubt about it. At the time that I checked, if you're looking for land, suitable land in a nice area in metropolitan Port-au-Prince, it's going to cost you much more. It's going to be harder. It's just going to be more challenging to find exactly what you're looking for, as opposed to if you're willing to move outside of Port-au-Prince to the countryside. So when I really had in my mind, like, okay, I'm back and that's it for me, I really started more so thinking about where do I want to be over the long term, because Port-au-Prince it didn't seem to me like the long-term solution in terms of living and spending the rest of my days. So I'd say land was a first factor. I'd be a liar if I said security wasn't another factor. So, there are times being in Port-au-Prince where it's just like, yo, I'm stuck in the house. I'm stuck in the house and I can't go out, or I shouldn't go out. And I remember, having to talk to whether it's family or neighbors, and just one of those first questions we'd ask, like, oh, how's it looking out there? And you're actually talking and trying to figure out if you want to go out or not. Um, talk about living raw or living locally. I'd also go to the outdoor market. I do my shopping, I buy my food. That's not common, right? We know that in our societies, mostly women who go there, but I like my independence. I like being able to go and pick my products and decide. I didn't want to have to pay somebody to do it for me, and whatnot. So just to circle back to security, I'd say that I've felt and I still feel pretty secure. It sounds kind of backwards, but because I've been out and about so much and so often, my face is well, it's known, not in a bad way or pejorative way, right? But I'm hip to the game, so to speak. As opposed to, had I not been out pounding the pavement consistently, there would just be a lot of things that I didn't know or I wasn't hip to, and I think that would make me vulnerable. So for folks deciding to come back, you gotta kind of decide which one suits you best, which one suits your personality. Are you more comfortable kind of getting a more secure situation? You having a car, having that set, you go out in your car. Are you more comfortable getting onto the moto or what kind of floats your boat? So I think that security kind of goes with your mental. But for myself anyway, I just felt like it would be more ideal or beneficial for me to just what's the best word? Integrate. Integrate, right? You're back home, so you just go ahead and integrate. In terms of scale between Port-au-Prince and Cape-Haitien, for those of the listeners in the States, I would say this: the difference in scale between New York City and Boston. If you look at the amount of people in metropolitan New York versus Boston, the scale is crazy. They're still considered two cities, right? But New York's got so many people. You could just take a borough of New York. The borough of Brooklyn itself has probably the same amount of people in it population wise as Boston does. And so Port-au-Prince, you're talking about a few million people in the metropolitan area. And then, you look at Cape-Haitien, size wise, comparatively, it's tiny. I remember when I visited Cape-Haitien, but when I finally got there and started walking around the city, I remember my first or second day a few years back, I literally walked from one end of the city to the other. And when I got to the other end of the city, I didn't even believe it, how small it was. I was like, how did I just walk through an entire city in less than 2 hours? And so compared to Port-au-Prince, Cape-Haitien, I felt like it's a neighborhood. The city, it's very, very small. I think security wise that helps actually, because in Port-au-Prince, if you have a bunzi, right, they could do some type of crime. They could do a crime in Pétionville, hop on a moto, and they could be way down in some other area of they could go to Centre-Ville ou bien by la ville. Like there's just a lot of space to hide. Whereas in Cape-Haitien, you do a crime in the city, there's basically only one way in and one way out. It's much easier to shut down the city or to kind of figure you out. And through my experience, I've seen cases where somebody's done something and days later, it's like, they found the dude. Days later they found who did the crime. And in Port-au-Prince, there's just a lot more chance for anonymity and stuff. Yeah.
You mentioned something about the marché, which I've sometimes when I go to the marché here and I post, did I get ripped off? I just bought 10 grenadiers for 1,000 goods. How did you figure out all that stuff? There's a question that a lot of people ask me as well. I don't go to the marché anymore. Now I have some, my wife and I, we have someone who does the marché for us. How did you figure that out? What was that process like? How was it in Oka with getting food and all that stuff?
So the marché it's been interesting for me. When I was going back and forth, I would always stay with family when I was living in Port-au-Prince. And in that sense, family, right? You're visiting, so there's things that they're gonna kind of take care of for you. Now, when you make that transition from visiting to living, right, it's not even the family who's trying to necessarily kick you out or whatever, but it's just like they've got their lives to lead. And on the flip side of that, you get to a point where you're like, hey, I'm looking to live, right? I'm coming back. So like you want your space, right? You want your autonomy. And so, when I got my little place, in Delma at the time, there's a lot of things that my family was taking care of that I was like, okay, I got to figure this out now, but before I decided to try to hire somebody or try to send somebody to the marché for me, I was like, I gotta know what I'm dealing with, right? Because I don't want a situation where somebody realizes I'm not hip to the prices, I'm not hip to the game, I'm not hip to how things happen, and that same person that you send to get your food is ripping you off, right? So for me, I decided, like, okay, I'm gonna start at the most basic level. I'm gonna go and handle it myself and figure it out, so that if I do get to the point where I'm gonna send somebody to take care of A, B, C, or X, Y, Z for me, I'm gonna know what I'm dealing with. So for the marché, it was a lot of just trial and error. So I could ask family, hey, what's the price? What's the price for like 5 tomatoes? Right. Then they tell me, okay, it's about this much. I'll go over to the marché. I'll look to get that price. And then I could quickly identify if somebody was ripping me off. There are times like when I got to Cape-Haitien, right? Because I don't got like a whole bunch of family or whatever in Cape-Haitien. So I could literally go to the marché, buy a pineapple, right? Now, if I'm walking away from the marché, I don't know if I got ripped off or not. But there's so many of the T-Machan walking around.
Mm-hmm.
So while I'm walking home with my pineapple, I can see a T-Machan walking with a bunch of pineapples. I'll stop her. I'll stop her on the street, and I'll say, "Hey, I just bought this pineapple for 100 goods, you know? And did I buy it well? Did
Mm-hmm.
how did I'll basically ask her, how did I do? You'll be surprised. Like a lot of folk would just tell you, like, oh yeah, yeah, you did well, or oh they got you this time, you know? So it's like not that big of a deal. There's been situations where I bought, you know, oh, you talk about, and I talked about having a diverse group of friends, right? So, I was walking with a friend a couple months back, and I saw her. She said, "Hey," she called out to Amashan and said, "Hey, that avocado you sold me the other day, I didn't like it. It went bad, you know, pretty quickly. I want you to give me another one."
Mm-hmm.
And she got another one right like that. And so
Mm.
I was like, "Oh yeah, you could do that." And so I went back a couple of days later. I went back to a Mashan that had sold me some stuff, and I said, "Hey, you sold me this stuff. I think it was tomatoes, and a couple of them went bad. This, that, and the third. And yeah, Chris, like you said, sometimes you got to be argumentative. But I basically said, yo, give me a new batch. Give me some more. Give me some more, right? And the thing behind that is, you know, if they treat you well, you're coming back, and if they don't, then you're not. So
Mhm, mhm.
yeah,
So,
just trial and
so
error.
cool, cool. So let's jump into the digital nomad part now, because when you're talking about buying
Hmm.
stuff, that needs income, right? And so we got to
Right.
talk about how exactly you went about supporting yourself. And so, as I mentioned at the top of the stream, you came in with the capacity where you find work from American companies, and you function, you do work for them, you have internet facilities, and then ultimately you get paid. And so talk about the type of work that you're able to do, because that can inspire someone else to also think about doing it too, right? And then ultimately the whole infrastructure that it takes to go about that. And again, if was that even on purpose? Did you on purpose choose your profession because of that, or just so happened, all that?
Sure, sure. So I'm going to back up a little bit again. Um, and for the viewers or the listeners, I'd say that it's going to depend, right, on is it a push factor or a pull factor, for you. So for me, initially, it was a push factor. I wanted to get out. I wanted to be away from abroad. I wanted to come back home. So I wasn't really thinking of working for an NGO or working for a Haitian company. What was in my mind was just, I'm ready to leave. I'm done. I got my degree. How do I get out of here? And so when I had been visiting family, and the natural thing to do was start looking at the local job market. Say, okay, I speak English. I've got this degree in psychology. I've got an interest in education. And so naturally, like I had mentioned before, I was thinking, well, I'll just teach. I'll teach in Haiti, and then I'll spend my summers in the States, right? So really thinking about how do you get into the local job market. Now, when you're deciding to go into the local job market, it's from what I've seen years past, and I haven't actually looked for a job. Excuse me. I haven't actually looked for a job at the local market in years, but at the time, it was very, very difficult and extremely competitive. It's an extremely competitive job market. And anybody who tells you differently is lying. It's a job market where if you're coming from abroad and you want to make um, a decent livable wage that you understand, being in the States or Canada or France, that decent livable wage when you come to Haiti it's really, it's a gold mine. There are few companies and few positions that you're going to find that is going to give you that wage that you want, and you really want it. Otherwise, you're going to put yourself in a position where you will have no choice but to be, at the marche and doing, like, living really locally, especially if that's not your cup of tea. So when I found out the difficulty of the local job market, we could just leave it to languages alone. So many positions at the time started to ask for English, French, and Creole, and that's a whole other discussion as to why. But once you see that, it's like, okay, if you don't have those mastered or really well, you're already at a disadvantage. And don't make any mistake. There's a lot of not a lot. Well, let me rephrase that. A ton of Haitian nationals are very, very competent and capable, and we know from the facts and figures that they leave the country. They're the little bit that who do remain, who do not become part of the brain drain. Trust me, they are very confident and capable, smart individuals, and don't think that you will be able to compete easily with them, even if you have an international degree, because they've got a lot of other things in their pockets that have led them to a particular, level in the country. So they're also very, very professional, and so just keep that in mind. It's not like a walk in the park. So to get to the digital nomad piece, I had thought about that just to figure out a way that I could continue to be in that American job market while living in Haiti. Because I thought, hey, that's the best of both worlds. That way I could get that wage that I'm trying to get, that livable wage, that will allow me to travel a bit more and whatnot, to get a certain standard of living. I've already been to college, right, in the States. I already know the system. I already know, I've mastered how it works. So why lose that? Why lose that competence and those skills and those connections and resources, right? So the digital nomad piece, it just came about like that. And when I thought about it, I was actually like, I'm willing to do anything. As long as it's remote, I'll do it. You want me to type? You want me to be a transcriptionist? I even care. You want me to tutor? I'll do whatever it is that is necessary as long as the job is remote. I wouldn't advocate for that. That was purely like more emotional. Like, I just want to be in Haiti. I'd really recommend, if you're looking to be a digital nomad or looking to go remote, whether you want to live in Haiti or not, wherever you want to go, you really got to treat it like a regular job search, because you're not, at the end of the day, you're not really willing to do anything and everything. You got to think about where your skill sets, your competence, and then decide from there. So I really relied on, education as my base. Anything surrounding education, curriculum, anything within that sphere, right? Just to keep it flexible, right? Because you're looking for remote jobs. So you want to be focused enough that you could find something, but you want to be flexible enough that what you find you can do remotely. And so anything in education is what I've hung my hat on.
Wow.
Oh, you wanted me to talk about infrastructure too, I think.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that whole setup. How did you actually go about, electricity and
Yeah.
and internet, and because you have to have stable internet, to function.
I tell folks, if I knew then what I know now, like, let's say hindsight is 2020. At my family's house, right, it was hard to get that consistent electricity. So the very first thing that I'm sure folks have heard is, you cannot rely on the grid. You cannot rely on EDH. If you're deciding to work for a France or Canadian or American-based company or any company in the developed country, you just cannot rely on the local grid system in Haiti. You will fail, or you will have a heart attack. So there were times that I would buy a UPS. A UPS is called an unlimited power supply, something like that. It's basically a battery. It's a battery. You plug it into an outlet, and when EDH, the National Electric Company in Haiti, gives electricity, you charge that battery. Okay, so that when the electricity is out, you could use that battery to power your stuff, to power your laptop, to power your hotspot while you work. Well, what if what if the Haitian grid system doesn't give electricity, or what if your battery just runs out of power? There were Skype calls I used to have, and my battery's about to lose charge. I actually had a situation where, in the middle of a meeting with my supervisor, my battery lost. I lost power. I didn't have nothing in the battery. I didn't have nothing in the laptop, and I had to circle back. And you basically got to be creative, and make an excuse. You don't want to be in that situation. So what I'd recommend is you either have to rent a place and negotiate with the landlord to have that included. So what that means is that the landlord is going to provide you with batteries, an inverter, solar panels, a generator, or all of the above. They're basically going to install that system so that you have electricity 24/7. Now that's gonna cost you. If you're asking them to do that, that's gonna cost you, and you've got to become an electrician. You have to understand your power consumption. So that's a big piece.
Internet, like I know it ultimately depends on where you are, but did you see differences in capacity versus Port-au-Prince and Cap-Haitien in terms of allowing you to function?
Yeah, absolutely. In Port-au-Prince, I have lived in Delma. I've lived in Toujours. Just different areas, and uh, there at the height of my time when I had a contract, I actually ended up signing up for all three internet services. A pretty penny. I had the Notcom internet service, I had Access IET internet service, and I had Digicel. And so you imagine you've got three internets, you've got three little internet boxes, three hotspots, and depending on the time of day, you're switching around and trying to see which one is going to give you the best signal, the best Wi-Fi signal. Um, Now there are implications in terms of where you could live. When I was thinking about leaving Port-au-Prince or even going to another area of Port-au-Prince, I was like, I want to be under the trees. I want to be out there in nature. I quickly learned, unfortunately, it was after I moved to a new area, that if you're in an area that's got a bunch of trees and stuff, your Wi-Fi signal can't even get through to your hotspot.
Yeah.
So I didn't know. I wasn't technical like that to know of that situation. So now there's implications in terms of where you can actually, where you can live. You can also look at fiber optic internet. So I do have to say, there are times when I've had better internet service in Haiti, whether it's Port-au-Prince or Cap-Haitien, than some colleagues have had in parts of the United States. So it's important not to completely knock the internet services in Haiti. There are some services in the States that don't even work as well. One of my clients we had a call, and one of my clients saw that there was some type of activity, and they thought it was me because they knew I was in Haiti. They said, "Oh, what's going on? Is that you?" I said, "No, my connection is fine." It was actually one of my colleagues' connections that was causing problems. So I would strongly recommend getting at least two of the Haiti internet services. whether it's NatCom, Access IT, Digicel, getting to, because one of the main things to remember in Haiti is that you have to have a backup. You just and when it comes to internet and electricity, that's excruciatingly important, because it's never going to be okay or acceptable to say to your client or to your job, yeah, I didn't have electricity. It's just not going to fly.
I know Mark can certainly speak to this, because even though he's bound to Haiti and doing NGO stuff in the country, it's an international entity, right? And so you do have meetings all the time, I'm sure, with your folks abroad. And I know for me too, like I guess it's to the point where like I'm like, first off, my business is outsourcing, so I have clients and I have to service them, and literally, like, you can go, if I go one day, and I've lost clients like that, where I went one day where I couldn't take calls, or my employees couldn't take calls, I lost those contracts, right? So it's very important to the point. So I mean, I have in my office 2 fibers, NatCom and Access Haiti, and if I could get the third, because they just also offers a fiber, I'd get that too, but they just don't offer it in my particular area, right? So internet's really important for me, and so it's just it can vary. There's so many factors. Like literally, you can be in an area where the overall signal is good, but then your building that you're in, the walls are too thick, and so you have to consider putting your fiber box outside, and then there's a whole bunch of other factors that you have to consider then. Because what if it starts raining, right? And so, but that aside, because we can have a whole episode just on that, I'm sure. So what I want to just find out, Junior, is that the process to get a remote gig, right? Because I can speak to my experience. It took me months, right? I'm a guy. I come from big data. I'm so qualified where if I'm in the States getting just a regular office gig or job, like literally, I'm headhunting all the time. Even as we talk, I have 4 headhunters in my email right now trying to get me to come over. And literally, I posted within a week. On Monday, on Friday, I'm hired somewhere. Like, that's my experience. But to get a digital nomad job, even in my domain where there's so much demand, it took me months. And I realized that one thing that helps considerably is certifications to help you stand out, because I think it's a combination of, there's not that many remote jobs, and then I feel like there's a lot of people trying to get them. And this is back 3 years ago, not today in the era of COVID and work from home, right? I'm not even getting there, right? And so I'm just curious, like, what some tips you would provide folks to getting it, and just sort of your workflow in terms of finding opportunities, what sort of websites. Really want to break that down to us, man.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would think that the thing that helped me the most, because I didn't have like big certifications or anything like that, but what I did have was, you really just need a client that provides you an opportunity to work from home, even if you're still in Canada or the States or the US. Do you have somebody who you're working with right now who would allow you to do 1 or 2 or 3 days from home? Because that's really what I ended up putting on my resume. People who are considering you for work from home, the first thing they want to know is, have you worked from home before, and can somebody vouch to your experience? And just to go back to that supervisor I was talking about, that I was having a meeting with her and all my power cut out. Luckily, that was only a one-time thing, right? But for the most part, our relationship was such that she was able to provide a really, really strong reference to me to say to folks, yes, he has worked from home. He has worked with us remotely, and this is what he was able to accomplish. So having somebody who could vouch for you. When I've applied to different positions, I've told them not only that references are available upon request, but I've put in my cover letters, you can talk to this client, this person, and leave those phone numbers there, and really even encourage folks to give your former supervisor a call so that they can speak on your behalf about, your ability to work from home effectively. I'd also talk about how I organize my day. So if you get to that cover letter, or better yet, if you get to the interview, you can actually talk about, this is how I organize my day, as I'm working from home. This is my Outlook calendar. This is my schedule. This is how often I check in. I always send weekly emails. That's something I've kept with me even when I worked in the States. I said, okay, at Friday afternoon, about noontime, you're going to get an email from me. Whether we have a face-to-face meeting or not, you're going to get an email from me detailing everything that I've completed, everything that's currently in progress, and anything that is pending. And so you just have to put a lot out there that you might not have to do when you're face to face, and your boss can just come by and check on you and have a quick conversation. I over communicate so that folks can really feel comfortable. Besides that, in terms of the actual search, Indeed.com is very good. Flex Jobs is something I've used. There's virtual vocations. There's a whole bunch of sites out there that you can start to tap into that can help provide guidance, or who focus on remote work. The next thing I would do as well is revise that resume. If you've got your address on there and stuff, but you're looking for a remote job, you've already done yourself a disservice. Take that address out and put at the objective on your resume that you're looking for remote opportunities. Try to be like you're looking for remote and remote only. If it's really 100% remote that you're looking for, you need to be clear about that. I've had interviews where folks thought that I meant that I was considering partially remote, 50%, 3 days a week, 4 days. So if in your mind right now, for the listeners and viewers, if in your mind you assume remote means 100% of the time, you need to make clear that that's your assumption to whoever you're communicating with, so that you guys are on the same page.
Interesting. I think you got some really practical steps right there for people listening.
So I know on my part, when it comes to the digital nomad lifestyle, making that money is great, but then getting it to Haiti is another story, right? Yeah. So walk us through some of the stuff you may use, and even Mark, I'm not sure. I think your NGO is probably registered in Haiti, so you're probably getting it straight from a Haitian bank account, right, Mark?
No, actually, I get direct deposits to my U.S. bank account.
Okay, yeah. So both you guys can talk to us about that. How are you getting it to Haiti to spend and do all your activities?
Yeah, so for that piece, I had thought, like a lot of folks, you might think traditionally that along with building a house, you want to get your bank account and whatnot. I should make clear that I do happen to travel. I still travel. So if I'm abroad for a certain period of time, I can just go into a bank and get my money, or go to an ATM and get the amount of money that I need. There's ATMs in Haiti. You gotta remember that they're not as reliable, right? So you gotta remember you can get to an ATM with the best of intentions, and it's out of service, and there's no saying when it will be in service again. So just be aware of that too. If you're planning to live in Haiti or be there for a long time, that the ATMs are not going to be your best friend. I've gone back and forth between opening accounts versus not opening accounts. I've looked at the different banks as well. But that's not my primary way to get money. For those, I think all of us on this call have had that experience of just that long line. I remember being in a long line at a Unibunk in Delma, and I'm just looking at this line, and I'm like, I'm never going to get my money. This is just not going to work. So I've shied away from banks for the most part. It's mostly been for me going to different ATMs if I need some money, or just getting the sum of money that I need, when I'm abroad, that I can take back. Not necessarily hiding money under the mattress, but taking out enough that I could be good in case I go to an ATM in Haiti and it's out of service, it's not functioning, that I'm not down to my last good, right? Before I re-up.
Right. And I'm not sure how the infrastructure is in OCAP, but thank God here in Port-au-Prince, I can get most things on my card. If I'm not buying anything from the marché, or if I'm not putting, even cut that I put on my phone, I can do it through a card. So I've been able to use my card mostly everywhere, markets, gas stations, restaurants. I can use, a debit card. The other thing is also, I always travel, or when I go out, I always go out with multiple cards, just because sometimes the card, I don't know if it's just me, but the cards doesn't always work, even if you have money on it. And so if you're not using a credit card, if you're using a debit card, for example, it may not go through. So I always have a debit card and a credit card just in case. But it's been really easy for me to use cards here. Like you said, ATMs are very iffy, not very reliable. And you can be very disappointed if you need cash. You're running all throughout the city trying to find a working ATM.
Yeah, luckily, so it's important to note, by the way, I'm sure that my cards that I use, I'm the same way, by the way, almost everything I purchase from groceries, everything has to be on card, because it's the convenience of not having to pay a transfer fee. Because I transfer all my funds to from American to my Haitian bank account, and it adds up. It's like the fees can range from $6 to $14 depending on how much you're trying to send over. So it adds up real quick. It actually can go as high as $30 actually, depending on what you're trying to do and when it is. And so the cards I have don't have a foreign transaction fee. That's really important to note, right?
Yep.
Oh, that's good.
Because if you're not, that's going to really tax you, right? Because it's usually a percentage of the value. And so it's really important to look for cards that don't have a foreign transaction fee. That's a real important thing to note. I'd say the last question I asked Junior from you is that, like, one thing I didn't maybe you said it and I missed it. Give us the categories of the best digital nomad sort of jobs in your opinion, that in terms of maybe high demand you feel like, and relatively quick turnaround from your experience. What do you think those are? If you could share.
Sure. So I would say that you're definitely Indeed.com is my go-to. And Indeed is incredible because it's available in so many countries. You could actually search for Indeed jobs in Brazil and Canada, and you could look anywhere and everywhere. And they have a structure that allows you to easily apply. So if you put your resume up there, you could apply to 5-10 jobs within 10 minutes. So I found Indeed to be really friendly, especially that you don't have to come out of pocket for that at all. LinkedIn has some items as well. LinkedIn, I've seen at times there's just a lot that they're starting to offer and putting that category in. You really want to look for sites like LinkedIn or Indeed or virtual vocations even, that allows you to select that category of remote. And I'd also mentioned flex jobs too. Flex jobs. I think that was more back in the day. I think they're still around. But basically, if the site doesn't have an option for you to select remote, then you probably shouldn't even be on that site. Glassdoor, from what I remember, Glassdoor.com is another site that allows you to toggle and choose, remote. You might have to type remote or work from home or telecommute. So try all three, and then you should see some options that start to pop up. I also want to swing back to what you mentioned, Mark, about the card, the ease of the card. For those who are looking to perhaps work and live outside of Port-au-Prince, meaning whether it's in Cape-Haitien or somewhere else, you really have to remember that you're conceding a certain level of infrastructure and ease. I actually enjoy the times I come back to Port-au-Prince and see family because I could whip out my card and use it almost anywhere. Not at all the case, in Cape-Haitien. There's a few select places where you can use your card with confidence, but 90% of the time you need to have the good old cash on you, which means that you really got to think and master or remaster that local currency system, as you're conducting your business.
Now, so Junior, so where to find that's one part of the question. But can you provide guidance on like some of the most common jobs? Like, for example, is it nursing? Is it, I know you're in this sort of curriculum design era yourself. In case you didn't talk about that, you're in that sort of curriculum design sort of realm. Or what other? I know maybe in IT. There's a lot of IT different roles that you can do, from just helping folks on like through help desk, and just some more analyst sort of traditional roles. So what do you feel like some of the you feel you've seen or you suspect or out of experience the biggest chances for folks to find remote?
Yeah, the more specialized you are, the higher demand. So if you are a nurse or a medical professional, you're likely to find a variety of things that are going to ask for that expertise. Think about medical transcription. Think about case management, caseload management, right? Because you have that body of knowledge that's going to really be helpful. Think about if you're an attorney or a lawyer, you have that legalese, that legal expertise and terminology that you can tap into that can separate you from the pack. I would say more general things. You could look on writing and communication, virtual assistant, executive assistant. Those are out there as well, right? But they're not as specialized, which means that you're going to be competing with a lot of other people, right? You're going to be competing with people from different majors, from different backgrounds, who feel like they can also be a virtual assistant or executive assistant. So I think the starting point would be, what is your degree in? What is your expertise in? Right? And then moving from there, because that's what's going to be able to differentiate you from a lot of the other folks that are looking for remote work. I haven't really looked enough to determine what's hottest out there right now, but the one thing that pops into my mind would be professions that, by their very nature, have been welcoming of remote work. So if you're a software engineer or a coder, computer programmer, if you're in IT, then you're already well situated, right? Because that type of industry allows for that remote work. If you're in, let's see, what else? Graphic design. You're a graphic designer. You sit at home and you're on Adobe Illustrator. It requires you to just more so be independent. You create a product and produce a product. You're in good shape. And again, education, creating a product and producing a product, it doesn't require as much meetings or interaction. You're more so providing a particular service or product, and you're able to produce something. So just try to think about industries that allow that. But if you're somebody who's you tend to have a lot of meetings, or maybe it just requires a bit more soft skills, those type of positions I've found those to be pretty challenging. Another hot position that's coming up is UX design. It's kind of similar to graphic design, but different in its own right. So if you're a UX designer, you could probably finagle remote work a little bit easier. Project management as well. I feel like that's starting to pop up more, with virtual teams. if you have a, talking about certifications, if you have I think it's a PMP, you have a PMP and you have some experience working remotely, you might be able to position yourself, to lead a project team, even if it's something that's not exactly in your domain. Look at higher education. If you're a doctor or a nurse, you might be able to land something where you're creating a course, or you're reviewing a course for a local university. So all things to consider.
And I think just to piggyback off that, one of the things that coronavirus is doing is having people work from home. And I think that on the
Hmm.
back end of this, there will probably be so many more opportunities that open up because of COVID-19 and what it has done. And now it's forcing people to think differently and work differently. So, digital nomad is definitely a space where I think a lot of people should begin to look into.
Yeah, Mark, I agree. I agree. I think, for better or for worse, I don't know how it's going to ultimately track up, because that may also mean there may be a lot more demand too. But we're hoping that the supply, i.e., employers considering that as a legitimate option, should open up, because I feel like, the numbers just make sense, right? The fact that you don't have to rent out so much office space as a corporate business, right? You just have your employees work from home. It just makes so much more sense. And I know the research has always been, well, we feel that people collaborate better and more productive in the office space where supervisors can walk around. I never really bought that. I always felt that you guys have to try more, like actually put a program in place so that folks can be
Right.
still productive and connected. And again, this crisis, this pandemic, is forcing employers to really do that, to actually put and say, okay, well, we really have to try to keep our productivity up. Let's hold these constant Zoom meetings. Let's do these sort of fun activities.
Hmm.
Let's X, Y, and Z, rather than just, oh, we tried it, we didn't feel it was good, we're gonna go back to So I think we'll see how this pans out, but overall, I'm optimistic that this may lead to more opportunities. So Junior, listen, man, I want to thank you so much. We're at the top of the hour here, man, and I want to thank you so much for coming in,
Yeah,
providing your
no problem.
perspective. It really was value added. I feel like this is an episode that people are going to refer to a lot when it comes to trying to understand not only what it means to transition, what it means to where to transition and why, and the fact that you did it as in such a raw way, where you really just literally took all your clothes off and dived right in the cold end of the pool, deep and cold end of the pool. Versus me, I always feel I did have a slightly insulated introduction to Haiti, because I was able to leverage my family's infrastructure a lot more between their vehicles, and they had a driver, and so, but you just kind of just jumped right into it. So much respect for that. And again, you do it as a digital nomad. I think that it's just something that I think if you can do it the way you're doing it, I think so many more Haitians can do it too.
Absolutely.
And again, you said it yourself. I like how you emphasized like security, where you felt like OCOP is even more secure because it's such a smaller town, and there's less places people can hide when they do desod, right? So those are all factors that I didn't, light bulb moments for me. Mark, what's some final thoughts on your part, bro?
Man, I think you're a pioneer in the diaspora digital nomad game, brother. So good to have you here in Haiti, and I'm looking forward to coming up to OCOP and hanging out. And yeah, thank you so much for all the nugget. We appreciate it.
Perfect. Yeah, I want to thank you guys for the opportunity to just talk shop and share thoughts. I've also learned and benefited from both of your perspectives. And as we've learned, there's a lot of ways to do this. There's a lot of ways to skin a cat. So folks, you just got to find out what works best for you, what's most comfortable. And just the last thing I would say is that if folks decide to be a digital nomad and coming back to Haiti, just make sure that you make time for your family, for your friends, and get out there. You don't want to move here and then just be in front of your computer all day. You want to make sure that you've got other activities and things to keep you integrated into the society. So you don't just want to be in here, you want to be of here and take part
Yeah.
of what's going on in the country.
That's what's up.
Yes,
What's
sir.
up? So that's the end of the Haitian Diaspora Living in Haiti podcast. My pimpo Haiti with Seejeanty and your favorite pastor,
Marc-Antoine.
All right. And again, our guest today was Junior JB, an OCOP native who migrated from America to live. Until next time, we're happy to have you listening, and we'll be back at it again.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Thanks, guys.